I want to start with this web page that is on my website. It shows you the conferences where I have been before, and this is not my first time that I am in Romania. Look, this is AIL 2013 is at the top, but the other conferences. What time is lunch, Maria? All right, here we have it. Open Agile Romania. That was May 22, 23, 2009. It was the fourth conference where I was. And it was one of my first. And I said, I want to thank you, Maria, for having faith in me back then, as a as a speaker just starting out.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun, and Corey Haynes was there, and other people that I learned a lot from. So I'm glad to be back here in Romania. And today I want to talk about interesting kinds of businesses in the 21st century. At least that's how I prefer to see them. Tribal businesses instead of boring, hierarchical, command and control kind of businesses. I want to explain what my idea is about that and how I'm trying to build a business like that myself. Can we dim the lights a little bit? Is that possible? Because it seems to be quite bright here in the front. So I want to talk about work and organization and management and success and happiness. Very important. Happiness as the last one. But first, let's talk about work. That's the first one. Why do we work? Bartek, why do people work? Can you give me an answer to that?
Yeah, for money.
For money, of course. Bartek works for money. Yay. Victor, what's your answer?
I am not working.
You're not working. It's your hobby. Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah. So, well, there are different answers to that. You've probably seen, some of you have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before. It is very famous. It says the first thing that people look for is food, and then health, and then friends, and then respect, and ultimately self-actualization. The word is a bit long, so I shortened it to self. Some people say actually it has 6 levels now, with at the bottom it says Wi-Fi. Right? I agree with that. Coffee should be there as well, as far as I'm concerned, and then everything else. So, and there is this implicit suggestion that there is a progression to the top. You have to take that with a grain of salt, this hierarchical aspect of the hierarchy. I mean, it's not really hierarchical, but it is a nice model. It is useful to reflect upon. And let me turn this a bit like this so I can see it better. And Gary Hamel, the famous management guru, said, only 1 in 5 people is truly engaged in their work. Truly engaged, he said in his book, What Matters Now. That's sad. That makes me very sad. Only 1 in 5 people like their jobs. And Jonathan Haidt, who is the author of The Happiness Hypothesis, great book by the way, he said, most people approach their work in 1 of 3 ways. As a job, or as a career, or as a calling. And I thought, I could map that to the hierarchy of needs perhaps. Like those people who see work as their job, they're just trying to buy themselves food or care for their health or their family or whatever. For some people, it is their career. So they ascended, and for them, their work helps them have friends and help them earn respect over time, etc., etc. But there's a small number of people, maybe 1 in 5, for whom work is a hobby. They self-actualize. For them, work is a calling. It is what they love doing. There's nothing better than working, and other stuff as well. But work is part of being themselves. And I think the people who talk about work-life balance, we hear that a lot over the last 10 years. Those are the people in the first 4 levels, because they have to balance it with something else that is still missing from their work. But the people who are there at the top will say, work-life balance, what the fuck? I am myself. I am already alive when I'm working. It's my hobby. And Ricardo Semler, some of you might know him as the CEO of Semco, a very famous company. He says, this popular concept of the work-life balance is not at all what we seek. He said in his book, the 7-day weekend. Right? Not the 4-hour work week, no, it's the 7-day weekend. It's weekend all the time at that company. People can do whatever they want. There is no work-life balance because work is life. So some people see this yin-yang thing of work versus life, where you have work on the one hand and life on the other hand. I think that's a bit silly. When I'm work, I'm not dead. I still live and breathe, etc. So work is part of my life, of course. Next question. Why do we work together? Chameleon. Why do we work together? Why do we need other people for work? Wonderful! To accomplish greater things that we cannot do ourselves. I'm not going to ask anyone else because I think his answer is perfect. Thank you so much. You want a mic? You want to take over? Okay. So yeah, and there's a nice book about that as well. It has, surprise, surprise, 5 levels. Tribal leadership. It says, in the beginning, life sucks. I remember when I just went to high school, it was awful. High school, oh, it was terrible. Life sucked. Well, I knew back then. But then after a few years, I noticed that everyone else was having sex except me. Alright, my life sucks, apparently. I ascended 1 level. And then I went to the university and my life changed and suddenly became popular and I made up for all the lack of sex I had in the past. And I thought, I am great now. And then the next level is, we are great. When we do things together, we think, oh, this is fun. Not having sex, of course, but doing projects, or maybe whatever. Doing projects, great work. I had some fantastic failed startups in the past. I talk about that in other keynotes. But we were having a lot of fun together, doing interesting work. And then the last part is, life is great. Life itself, everyone should be having fun and should be reduce this difference between work-life balance. And there is this progression upwards again. We shouldn't take it too seriously, but it's a nice model. It's a nice model. It is useful. And again, I see this difference of job versus career versus calling. I could almost map it onto each other. So the interesting thing is, I find, can we have businesses where people see their work as a calling, more than just a job, more than just a career? And there are plenty of people who write about that. This is one of the former CEOs, James Parker, of Southwest Airlines. It's a very famous company. It is the only airline in the world that has been profitable for 40 consecutive years. 40 years of profitability, including after 9/11. It was difficult for them, but they were still profitable, and they are the most popular airline in the US, the biggest domestic airline. And they have a lot of fun working. So he said it's a mission, the company mission is a mission that should allow people to go home and say, I did something great today, together with other people, indeed, as Camelia said. Richard Branson agrees, famous for his Virgin companies. We must turn a profit while making the world a better place. That is why we need a profit, so that it helps us make the world a better place. And we do that together, and usually when we have people doing things together, we call that a community. Communities of people who are bodies of persons with a common and especially professional interest scattered throughout a larger society sometimes. Like the Agile in Europe community. Right? A number of people who are professionally aligned together, and we call it a community. So we can draw it like this. Some people call it a tribe, others call it a community. Both words are fine as far as I'm concerned. And this is my representation of it. By the way, some of you know that I tend to draw things in my books and articles, and some people have said to me, oh my God, you are so awesome at drawing, and I wish I could do that. Bullshit! Anyone can draw. So to prove that, for this presentation, I intentionally have used my left hand. Well, I'm usually right-handed. I use my left hand and made the silliest pictures that I could make. And I used them in my presentation just to show you anyone can do this, okay? So I hope you'll be inspired to upgrade your visualization in your next presentation too. Sorry? Okay. Next quote is from Yvon Chouinard. I have no idea if I pronounced his name correctly. He is a former CEO of Patagonia, a famous company for outdoor clothing. And he said, I see our company as an ecosystem, as a community. With its vendors and customers, they are all an integral part of the whole system. And John Mackey of Whole Foods Market, fantastic supermarket where I've been several times in the US, he said that the company is, and its purpose is a magnet to attract the right people, the right team members, customers and suppliers and investors, and they should all be aligned. It is all a community of people working together towards a great purpose. So this is the community, and we can also see that tribe as stakeholders of the community with a common interest. So I asked the questions, why do we work and why do we work together? Well, my conclusion is that we have communities of stakeholders working towards a purpose. That is my first principle. It would be my first principle for businesses in the 21st century. Try to see it as a community of people working towards a greater purpose. Alright, organizations, next one. What exactly is an organization? Oana, how do we find something, how do we find a community as an organization? What is different? What makes an organization?
They have a common purpose.
They have a common purpose, but a community could have a purpose as well. Organizations formalize. Interesting. Yeah. Anyone else? What makes something an organization? What turns it from a community into an organization? Profits. There are non-governmental organizations. Structure. Exactly. It is organizing things means giving it structure. So organization is an administrative and functional structure, or the personnel of such a structure, and there are more definitions of it. But that would change the organization, the community, into what we call an organization. Now, if you ask somebody, could you draw the organization of an average company, what do they usually do? They create a hierarchy, an organizational diagram. Exactly. They create this. Oh, yes, the org chart, the default template in PowerPoint when you say insert organization. That is, you know, if something is the default in PowerPoint, it is wrong. All defaults in PowerPoint are exactly the opposite of what we should have. So this is the hierarchy. Hierarchies are useful sometimes, by the way. And some people then say, well, we have networks as well. We have informal networks in our organization of people working together, like communities of practice or something like that, which is nice. And Donella Meadows, great systems thinker, said, these hierarchies are brilliant inventions. We need them. Basically, they are abstractions. It allows us to talk about a team, for example. That is a hierarchical notion. We abstract away from the team members and we call them a team. Otherwise, it's impossible to have conversations with each other. So that is useful. But at the same time, the world consists of networks. Said Fritjof Capra, who wrote about complex systems, there are networks everywhere. This is the default, basically. And Gary Hamel said basically the same thing. He said, we have a new way of organizing ourselves nowadays in the form of networks instead of hierarchies. So this should be the default. And maybe in some places we have some hierarchies to ease conversation or whatever, to make it easier to work with each other. But the default is a network. Now the next question is, what makes it a corporation? Vasco. What turns an organization into a corporation?
Law.
Law, indeed. Very good. Anything else? Yeah, profit usually is involved, indeed. More structure. Even more structure, right?
Extinction.
Yeah. So the organization becomes a corporation when it is formed and authorized by law. It is now something that we officially recognize. It has a registration number somewhere. And it is legally endowed by rights and responsibilities. It is actually, it can operate as a person according to law. And it is allowed, it can be punished by law. That is the difference between a formal corporation and an informal community. So we recognize it as something different. But the problem that I see is, usually in corporations, we have this language of the corporation owns the human resources that we work with. The community of people who are trying to do good work towards a common purpose, the corporation owns that community. Oh, that sends shivers down my spine. Or our employees are our greatest assets. My God. Well, they mean it well. Let's see it from the positive side. They mean it well, but we're not on the balance sheet of the corporation. Thank you very much. So I don't see it like that. I don't see the corporation owning a community. I prefer to see it like this: a corporation serving a community. It is very much like Mosaic Works is doing right now. It serves the community, the Agile Lean Europe community, because the community does have need for paying things and receiving invoices and being legally responsible for things that happen. This requires some legal aspect to what the community is doing. So some legal entity should be providing that service to that community. So I see legal entities, corporations, as serving the community, not owning it, serving it. It's like a platform, basically, that you're creating. And then the next question I wonder about is, where should we put that corporation? Do we put it here, or 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 here? Lots of nice places in the world. Well, isn't that a bit old-fashioned nowadays in a globalized world? Why don't we put it everywhere? That would be much more interesting. Why are we not by default everywhere in the world? That would be nice. We should have a network, globally represented. So to answer my own questions, what is an organization? What is a corporation? I prefer to see it in the 21st century as something that has a network structure, not a hierarchical structure, but the network should be the default. And yes, it is. It has legal entities, and it should offer services. It should not own the community, it should service the community. Alright. Management. Ooh, one of my favorite topics. Let me have a bit of wine for that. Okay. Management. Do we need management?
No.
Angel.
Yes, we do.
Of course, he wrote the book, so we'll not listen. Let's not listen to him. Is that Mark? Is that your name? Maris. Ah, okay. Okay, and why do we need management?
Because no matter how we organize things, we have to chart targets and to drive it.
Right. Exactly. So what you start out with, somebody has to decide how we organize things. That's a very good point. So I agree. Somebody wrote a book about it, and surprise, surprise, it has 5 levels. What is that with 5 levels? I don't know. But anyways, Jim Collins wrote the book. It's very famous, Good to Great, and this is the one I admit I like the least, because he says we start as individuals. And then the next level is to become team members. And then if we get better, we could become managers. And if we really do well, we could become leaders. Whew. And the ultimate achievement is to become the executive. Wow. It makes me puke. Seriously, I wanted to throw the book away at that point when I was reading it. My God, what an old-fashioned way of looking at things. Why cannot individuals be leaders as well? In certain areas, things that they are responsible for in the organization. And I always say everyone is managing things all the time. We're all managers. So I completely ignore this hierarchical model. But, and by the way, Ralph Stacey, one of my favorite complexity researchers. He said, this distinction made between managers as traditional and leaders as charismatic, it is nonsense. It's just an idealization. It has emerged in the 50s, but it was the same thing before that. It makes managers look more important. So you see these websites now and then of old-fashioned organizations where the top management team is now called our leadership team. They did a search and replace on the word management all through the website and all the documents, and now they're called the leadership instead of the management. Well, nothing has changed really. So I see it a bit different. I see it as leadership and governance. Because yes, we need leadership. There's a fantastic example of leadership right now. We all came here to Bucharest because somebody was leading the effort of getting us here. And they did a good job. Maria and Alex and all the others, Saket and Mike. So they are obviously leaders. They led us to this place and time. But at the same time, I'm sure there are some rules. They govern as well. They are able to kick us out for misbehavior. Sorry, Camelia, watch out, because you never know what they're going to do here during this conference. So that is what I call management. It is both leadership and governance at the same time. And it is pretty hard. Peter Drucker, the most famous management expert last century, said, not knowing how to manage is the single largest reason for failure of organizations. Not knowing how to manage is the single largest reason for failure. And Mike Ruther of Toyota Kata, he said about management, he said, look at that. My definition, the systematic pursuit of desired conditions of utilizing human capabilities in a concerted way. It looks like poetry. I hate poetry. I never know what it says. I don't understand poetry. So, what he means is managers manage the system, not the people. That's how I would phrase it. But hey, I'm a writer. So that's what he means. He means managers are responsible for managing the system, not the people. Somebody has to manage that system around and serve in the community. Now what I find interesting is when we look at a country, just another example of a community, when we look at a country, it has a border, a boundary that is geographical. There are people doing things together. They share the same geographical boundary. And then when we look at an organization, that is a community with an economical boundary. What is the difference? I have absolutely no idea. It looks almost the same, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, well, maybe there are differences in the details. But I am very much inspired by how we run countries where the people that we elect are the managers, basically, of the countries. I would like to compare that with managing organizations. So, who appoints management? Who are the people who usually appoint managers? What does the sticker say? Alain, all right. Who appoints the managers in traditional organizations? Other managers. And who appointed them? Executives. And who appoints the executives? The board. And who appoints the board? The shareholders. Now we get there. That's the 5 whys almost. Alright, so yes, the shareholders or stockholders, they have a special place in corporations because they decide basically who manages that community that we call an organization. Now, there is a reason for that. There is a good reason. As John Mackey wrote in his latest book, he said, these stockholders, they own the corporation because they are last in line. They get paid last. First we pay our suppliers and we pay our employees and we pay the debts to banks, etc., etc. And if there is something left at the end of the line, only then the shareholders get a portion of that. So yes, for good reasons, they should have a stake in what is happening and who manages those finances. But at the same time, I also believe in what Robert Hurley wrote in Decision to Trust. By the way, the best book about trust. If you want to know more about trust, read this book. It is awesome. He said, Serving one group at the expense of others leads to distrust and a risk to the sustainability of the firm. So just only looking at shareholders is a mistake. We have other stakeholders as well. And Russell Ackoff, great systems thinker of the last century, he said, a corporation that fails to see itself as an instrument of all its stakeholders will fail. So this is what we should be doing. Ricardo Semler says, what we should do is determine if a company is doing well by asking our stakeholders and our employees and our clients and the supplier and the local geographical community. They're all stakeholders in that organization. So everyone is important. Managers should be listening to everyone, not just to stockholders, not only to customers, everyone. It is a delicate balancing act, actually. That's why it makes it so difficult to manage. And it's very much like a country. Lots of stakeholders we have out there. We have to balance all their needs, the individuals versus the businesses and everyone else. How do we do that in countries? Usually with constitutions. Almost every country in the world, except for Britain, but the British are weird. Sorry about that, Liz. Almost every country in the world have a constitution. And the constitution describes how a country is run. Who is able to manage, who is allowed to manage that country. Why should we not have something similar or the same for a corporation? So I believe, and this is something for you to consider maybe in the future, that management should somehow be constituted in your organization. Somehow you should have a document say, this is how we elect management on behalf of all the stakeholders. Yes, the shareholders are important, but the others are important too. They are all stakeholders in that community. All right, let's talk about success. Very interesting topic. How do organizations survive? How do organizations survive? I am very much inspired by complexity science, as some of you might know if you've read my work. And in one of my last chapters of Management 3.0, I described fitness landscapes. I find an awesome metaphor. The scientists describe that all complex systems that are trying to survive are basically traveling across a fitness landscape, full of hills and valleys and peaks and everything, and they're trying to find the peaks in that landscape. That is the optimal performance. And that is very difficult. For example, it means that if you do step-by-step improvements, you are guaranteed to achieve local optimum. That will be here. You would end up here. But in order to reach this peak, you'll have to jump. Or things have to get worse before they get better. That's why we sometimes say it's one step back, 2 steps forward. Yes, in order to achieve another optimum that's even better, you cannot improve with just step-by-step improvement. It's not a linear thing. So I find that fascinating. That's why, for example, in Lean, they have the difference between Kaizen and Kaikaku. Kaizen is step-by-step improvement. Kaikaku is revolutionary change, when the small steps are not working anymore. But there's something else that is often forgotten in in Lean and Agile, is the steps you make yourself are changing the landscape. This was nicely described in some of the complexity science books, where they said, this landscape is made of rubber. Just stepping on it changes it. And your walk may very well lead to the disappearance of a mountain. And another one, just behind your back, suddenly pops up. You just have to turn around, go back to where you came from. Anything could happen, because the landscape is changing all the time, because people are walking on it. That's a very interesting metaphor. So we have an influence on the environment. And that's what Drucker said basically as well last century, is that to survive and succeed, every organization will have to turn itself into a change agent. The most effective way to manage change is to create it. You have to create the change around us, make the landscape. Eric Ries of the Lean Startup, very famous book, I'm sure many of you have read it. He said, I've come to believe that learning is the essential unit of progress. So learning is what we need in order to survive and find our way across that landscape. This is why many people now speak of learning organizations, popularized by the Fifth Discipline, the book by Peter Senge. All organizations should learn all the time. And Chris Argyris said, getting there from here, that path across the fitness landscape, it will require change that is transformational and creative. Transformational not just for ourselves, but also for the landscape. And creative, ooh, I like that word, because it has this association with the creative economy that many people are now talking about in the 21st century. The new age, after the information age and the industrialized age, we're now entering the creative age. Innovation is the buzzword. Learning all the time. So, then the big question is, if we know that surviving means learning, then how do we learn fastest? What does it mean to learn and to create? Well, I created this simple model just a number of months ago. I find this very useful for me. For example, if we have good practices, like I have this timer that says that I now have spent 35 minutes. That's useful for me. I do this always as a speaker. This is a good practice. I don't rely on clocks that turn out to be standing still or whatever. I use my own timer. This is a good practice. I know that it works. So it is on this side of the model. It's a good practice, usually successful. Sometimes good practices fail, because anything could happen. It's a complex environment. Now on the other side, we have making mistakes. I earned myself an extra 30-minute walk yesterday night because I forgot my bag at the restaurant. And that's like the 10th time it happens. So that is repeating the same mistake. It leads to failure, and I didn't learn anything. I already knew that I'm stupid. So nothing to learn there. This side of the spectrum is making mistakes. Very little learning, usually failures. In the middle, this is the most interesting. In the middle we find running experiments. That is doing things that we've never done before. We have no idea if they're good practices or bad practices. They're not mistakes yet because we have no idea what the outcome is. Then, learning is optimal. This is why we learn. According to Donald Reinerson, who wrote a great book about it, called Principles of Product Development Flow, he said, we should avoid oversimplifications. Sometimes people say, we should celebrate failure. Are you nuts? Because celebrating failure is celebrating the bottom part of the diagram. Well, many failures are the results of mistakes. You would be an idiot to celebrate those. Yes, you can celebrate failure if you ran an experiment. That's no problem. Then the celebration should be about the experiment and the things that you learn. So you should be celebrating the learning, not the failure. That doesn't make sense. And he also said, eliminate failure also makes no sense, because that means just that people are just trying to do the same thing, just doing good practices. That's also not good either, because you're just repeating good practices. You know that you usually work, but you're not actually moving forward. Not making progress, not learning, and ultimately not surviving. So it's about running experiments with optimal learning. My brother of Toyota Kata, in a less poetic way, now he said, since the way ahead is a gray zone, if we want progress, we must experiment. So, my conclusion, the fourth one, after asking the questions, how do these organizations survive, and how do they learn, my conclusion is, we have to run experiments, and we have to support learning as organizations. That is the ultimate thing that we should be doing. All right, let's summarize. Let's summarize. One little nip of my white wine. It's not wine. I don't drink wine, but many of you know that though. So suppose that you are trying to build a new company, or you're considering to launch a startup or whatever, or you are the owner of a company. I want you to consider these things. Just think about them. Can you see your company as a community of stakeholders who are working together towards a great purpose? What is the purpose of your organization? Why does it exist? What makes the world a better place because your organization is there? That is something that you should be thinking about, I think. And the second, formalizing the organization, it could mean maybe thinking of a network instead of a hierarchy. Could you do that in some way? Have the legal entity part serve the community instead of owning it? No, let's see it as something, as a platform that is lifting up the community and make it perform better. And the third one is, who is managing it? Can you somehow have constituted management? Is it described somewhere? Can anyone ultimately become a manager if they are voted in by others or somehow? Just see it as if you're running a country. The best performing countries in the world are the most democratically run countries. That is no coincidence. And last one, support learning by running experiments all the time. That is how you survive ultimately. Alright, let's talk about happiness. That's the last topic. Happiness. There are some people who say that happy people produce better results. Is that true, Claudia? You believe happy people produce better results? Do we agree with that? Happy people have greater performance in organizations? Alright. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? Alright, can you explain that? Anna, you disagree with that?
I disagree with that because happiness produces more results and possibly more results in the point of view of these people. But there is still a need for the pessimist who can run risks and think about what can happen not that positive. This makes organizations more solid.
Oh, that's an interesting view. Thank you. And there was another hand that went up. Sorry. Okay, let's ask. I'm interested. So, Liz.
You need people that are dissatisfied with the status quo in order to progress.
Right. Interesting. We need dissatisfied people, almost a little bit unhappy about certain things, for them to feel incentivized to change it, perhaps. Right? Okay, good point. Interesting. The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt is a very good book about this very thing. How do we see happiness? What does it mean for people to be happy? And he said, from a lot of research, we have realized by now that happiness comes from making progress. It is not from reaching a destination. It makes you happy at that point in time, but then the next day, okay, done that, what else? Right? And then you're unhappy because that becomes the new norm. So being able to do things today that you were not able to do yesterday, or achieving something that you were unable to achieve yesterday, that makes you feel happy. So there's this need to feel that we're going somewhere. And actually achieving the destination, well, the destination, it could be like the rainbow. We'll never get there, but just walking towards the rainbow, that makes us happy. That is one conclusion. Another interesting fact, nicely described in The Halo Effect by Phil Rosenzweig. He said, yes, we can correlate happiness with performance. And sometimes people say that happy people produce better results, they achieve better performance, and we can measure that, but usually there's the effect the other way around is much higher. The good performance of organizations makes people happy. So what should we be aiming for if we want everyone to be happy? It is not making them happy. Now, that would be easy. Just throw a party with free sex. But that is a simple thing, the simple approach. The more difficult approach would be better performance of organization. If we're able to do that, then ultimately people will be happier, because good performance of organizations makes people happy, feeling that progress. So I want to show you a little video. I still have about 15 minutes. Let me show you this video. I'm very, very proud of it. Whoops, very proud of the video.
This is Melly, and Melly hates her job. Unfortunately, Melly is not the only one. Many people don't like their jobs, and that's a sad thing. The world would be more interesting if everyone loved their jobs. Fortunately, some help is on the way. Hi, I'm Happy Melly. I want to help people become happy workers and live better lives. But I realized only workers in a happy business can help other people be happy. As a happy business myself, my goal is to bring great ideas to knowledge workers. I can do that by publishing those ideas and by getting people together to inspire each other.
This is in Zadar.
I can work with writers and designers
This is
to
in
make
Rotterdam.
inspiring books and videos. I can help to bring great games and courseware to trainers and facilitators. I can assist with websites, videos, and apps around important topics. I can help coordinate reviews, illustrations, and translations. I can support conferences, workshops, seminars, and other events. And I seek, collect, and share stories of happier people. Look at poor Melly. She's about to go under in her awful job. But maybe with great publications and events, we can reach out to her in time. We can give her some new ideas to experiment with to make her job more fun. Melly deserves to be happy, and we can help her achieve that. But we can only help Melly be happy if we are happy ourselves. I am Happy Melly, and I'm a new kind of business. I'm a happy business.
All right. So, thank you. So I'm showing you this to show you what the end result is of something that started a year ago. I was very much inspired by this poster. I show it in another presentation at the start. It is a big billboard that is in my hometown in Rotterdam. It says, Melly Sham hates her job. And nothing else. Just Melly Sham hates her job. And there are many people like that. Many people who are hating their jobs. As Gary Hamel said, 4 out of 5 people in the world are not feeling engaged. So me and Varsko and Martin and a couple of other people felt so much inspired by changing organizations that we took this image of Melly and turned it into Happy Melly. We want to make Melly happy. But the thing that we discuss is we want to live by what we preach. I find that very important. If you're speaking at conferences, if you're doing workshops, then you have to live by the values that you want other people to live by. So how can I implement the most inspiring new kind of business as an experiment? As an experiment of coming up with a new kind of organization. That was the concept that we discussed. So, for example, what we did was we invited people to start Happy Mellies. We now have 6 Happy Mellies in the world. We have lots of stakeholders, by the way, lots of people involved. There are 6 Happy Mellies, 3 in Europe and 1 in Canada, 1 in Brazil, and 1 in Australia. And there is a constitution. We have a constitution. We have a document that describes how we manage our organization. And for example, the constitution describes that some things have to be paid for from a central account. Somebody should manage that. That is like the government. So those entities, those legal entities that all operate under the same name, but without a head office, that is so 20th century. Had to have a head office. That's so boring. We work without a head office. We have Skype. We have Google Hangouts. So problem solved. We can easily discuss things together. These different legal entities, they decide together on who is managing that business. And those board members, as we call them, they decide what the money is spent on. Where does the money come from? Tax, of course. Those legal entities can do anything they want. Like my legal entity in Rotterdam is doing the Manager 3.0 licensing program. That is my business. But in Brazil, they are considering new courseware about learning. All right, fascinating. And in Sweden, they are trying to aim for top management. They say we have to convince CEOs and CIOs to be agile. There's a different target audience. We need a different kind of events and workshops there. So they're trying to do that now. And everyone will be taxed because we're working together as one community, and a part of what your income will be paid to the central account. And that those central accounts are being used to pay the bills for stuff that we do for everyone, like making a video. And this video is created by Marta and George, two awesome designers. They just finished animation school, and they already have a big pipeline of projects, I'm proud to say, not just for me, but by other customers as well. So they are a supplier, but that also makes them a stakeholder, because we have an economical relationship with each other. So yes, they are allowed to vote on who is CEO of our company. They get a say, like all other stakeholders, all other suppliers, all other employees, anyone involved. Once every few, I don't know, months or whatever, we don't have a specific term, they can decide who gets to manage that company. Fortunately, they chose me. I'm very happy about that. But, and this is true, the Constitution says any day they can get together, those stakeholders, and if they have a majority, they can just kick me out. So every day I have to keep the trust in the network. Isn't that what all CEOs should be doing? Every day, keep the trust of everyone involved, not only the shareholders, the owners of the legal entities, but also the suppliers and the customers and anyone else involved. Keep that trust all the time. As soon as you fail, we'll kick you out. You don't have a term of 4 years, because then you only have to do an election tour, and then you can sit on your big chair for 4 years and nobody can get you out. No. Keep the trust every day. I find that much more natural. And yes, we support learning through experiments. We even have a Trello board for that, for all the experiments that we're thinking of. And half of them are supposed to fail. I would feel bad as a CEO if all of this was succeeding. Well, fortunately, it is not, probably. Fortunately, some things will be failing. So that means we are learning. We're learning how to create better courses, introduce new events, etc., etc. And we're going to discuss, we're discussing publishing already, publishing books. A lot of things to do to help people be happy. So this is an example that I'm running together with Vasco and Martin and Lisette and Sergey and Johan and many others. And I give you that as an example of how I try to apply the principles to myself, running a new kind of organization. So wrapping it up, I would try to challenge you to apply this to your business, to your startup, anything that you are running. Can you somehow see your organization as a community of stakeholders working towards a purpose? Our purpose of Happy Melly is to make people happy, but we know that this is not a direct approach. It can only be achieved in roundabout ways, like improving performance of organizations. But you might have another purpose. I know someone whose purpose, I'm not naming any names here, but I know someone whose purpose is to make awesome cars that are environmentally friendly. You'll learn about that later on during this conference. The second one, a network of legal entities. They should support the community. They not own it. We do not have people on our balance sheet. We support them. The only thing that the legal entity should be doing is the legal stuff, signing contracts, paying bills, and receiving money and storing it into an account. That's what we have legal entities for. Constituted management, how get those managers to be elected? If only the shareholders get to say who is a manager, you might have a problem somewhere down the line. So you might want to reconsider that. And support learning through endless experiments. All right. Well, that's it. That is how I envision a tribal business. This is my blueprint for a tribal business in the 21st century. And hopefully part of this is inspiring to you. And I wish you a lot of happiness in your jobs. Thank you very much. I see I have a few minutes left. Is there anyone who has an interesting, challenging question for me? A complaint? All right. Adrian.
Yes. How do you manage who is and who isn't a shareholder? Once it's in there, how do you come out if you don't want to be there? How does that work?
And you mean specifically in my organization?
Yeah.
So how do you manage who is a shareholder? Well,
Stakeholder.
A stakeholder. Oh, stakeholder. Okay. Well, the Constitution says anyone with an economical relationship with my business, with Happy Melly, is a stakeholder. Now, this is, of course, something that needs to be defined over time. But the Constitution that we created is basically stolen from the constitutions of the United States and America and the failed one of the European Union. So, and they all have more or less the same structure of things that they define in the Constitution. And those constitutions, for example, they speak of citizenship without defining what makes a person a citizen of a country. That is not defined in the Constitution. That you will need to define in further laws that are detailed, like what does it mean to have a passport and for how much time will they be valid. That's not interesting for a constitution. So constitution is the general outline, and specific law is those decisions. So I see it as the same thing. We have that generic outline, but we don't have the specific rules yet of at what point do you become a stakeholder and when do you stop being a stakeholder. We'll solve that issue once it becomes a problem, I'm sure. Right now, it's not a problem. So delay those decisions for as long as possible, and then at some point, I'm sure there will be a defined rule that allows people to have a vote in who becomes the new CEO, hopefully in a long time. Good question. Other questions? Yeah.
In the beginning, I understand you talked about no balance between work and the rest of life.
Yeah.
Surely you must manage some kind of balance.
Good question.
I certainly am, but
sure. Yeah. So this is about work-life balance, and you say at some point, of course, some things have to be balanced. I totally agree. So the work-life balance, the term as it is usually used by people, is a definition or a use that I disagree with, as if people cannot find happiness in their work and have to seek it in the rest of their lives. For me, I do not have starting hours or end times of my working days. There's no difference for me between weekends and work weeks. Everything is fluid. But of course, I have a spouse to take care of, or usually it's the other way around. I like reading books. There's no work aspect there at all. This is just entertainment. I just finished watching Battlestar Galactica. We now switch to Spartacus, and the next one is probably Doctor Who. So, yeah, that is not work either. Of course, that part needs to be balanced. There are things that we do because I call it play. We like playing as well, and hopefully there is a big gray area in between where we actually have no idea, is this work or is this something else? Do we get paid for it or not? Well, who cares? I'm having fun. And that's what I aim for. So I just 2 or 3 weeks ago I tweeted that management 1.0 is work-life destruction or something, and management 2.0 is work-life balance, and management 3.0 is work-life integration. Let's blur it intentionally and allow people to live with their families where they work, and at the same time do work in their homes, and let's not care about what's happening where. We trust them that they want to do a good job, because for them their work is their calling. So get rid of timesheets and all that stuff that helps people to have a work-life balance. Well, screw that. That is my opinion. But you're right, there are some things, like for example, I stopped working at 11 at night because I just told Joe yesterday night it helps me sleep better. If I stop working at 11, don't read emails and just read a novel at dimmed lights, and then I can sleep like a rose. But if I keep working until 12:30 and then go to bed, I'm wide awake. That's bad for my health. So, yeah. Vasko.
One interesting question related to this work-life balance is, can the structure of the organization determine what becomes work-life balance or not? So you gave an example of people not being able to work at home, for example. And we have, most of us that work in the software world have heard of what happened when Marissa Myers joined Yahoo, and she said you can't work from home anymore. That, of course, destroyed a lot of people's already preset work-life balance.
I agree. Yeah.
So the question that I have in my mind, can certain types of organizations actually effectively determine that you can't do anything else but balance work and life? Like, for example, hierarchical organizations, Stu early in the morning, not enough coffee. Hierarchical organizations might actually dictate that the best you can do is work-life balance. And maybe what we should be looking for is totally different organizational structures.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Yes, I see management 2.0 kind of organizations where work-life balance is actively supported, and the companies hire yoga teachers and make massage, free massage available, etc., to make you feel well during office hours. And somebody wrote, well, why should the company provide all that? Why can you not leave it to the people to organize themselves and not watch their office hours and just have them self-organize? Trust them that they're trying to get the job done. And if they want a yoga teacher, they can somehow pay for it themselves, or they can organize it in lunchtime or whatever. One concrete example from my own experience, very simple example, is 2-3 years ago, the last soccer team that I worked on, one person was living 1.5 hours away from the office, and the others were like a 15-minute drive to the office. So we allowed him to have special rules of being in the office or not. Because sometimes it was simply hard for him to arrive at all when there was huge traffic jams or infrastructure problem. So yeah, he could stay at home and work, but we didn't allow any of the others because we wanted to work together, sit together, pairing, etc. That was much more effective for us to be at the office. But Niels, he was the one who was allowed to stay at home. That was an agreement we had as a team. And I think that is quite similar to the other work-life balance aspects that we seek as an organization. Why should the organization mandate that the person always should be at the office, or that in order to have a work-life balance you are allowed one day at home to support you in your work-life balance? Whatever. That's what people, self-organized people, should be able to achieve amongst themselves, I'm quite sure. So mandated work-life balance by the organization, I don't believe in that. I call that 2.0, not 3.0. Last question. I ran out of time, I'm afraid. Next questions in the break. I'm sorry about that. Next questions in the break. Thank you very much for listening. And